When silence speaks louder than evidence, every cold case has a heartbeat, faint, buried, forgotten, but never truly still. This is not just a story about justice, it's about how justice waits in the shadows. In silence, sometimes for decades, and when all logic has failed, when every clue has faded, when the system no longer listens, something, or someone unexpected rises to speak on truth's behalf. It all began on an ordinary rainy afternoon, in a quiet precinct that had long stopped believing in miracles. The officers didn't know it yet, but the moment that old police station door creaked open, everything was about to change. An old blind black woman walked in alone, uninvited and unshaken. She didn't come to ask questions, she came with answers. The woman who walked through the rain didn't just fall that afternoon. It crawled down the windows of the Southside police station like time itself was weeping. Officers were sipping bitter coffee, burying their boredom in files that hadn't mattered in years. It was the kind of day nothing was supposed to happen. Then the door creaked, not burst open, not slammed, just creaked slowly. An old black woman stood silhouetted against the wet gray light outside. Her figure was slight, but she held herself like someone who'd walked through storms far worse than this one. A navy shawl hugged her narrow shoulders. A weathered, wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face. Her cane tapped the linoleum with a patient rhythm, one step at a time, and beneath the rim of her hat, dark glasses obscured her eyes she no longer used. She was blind, but somehow everyone in the room felt like she was the one seeing them. Sergeant Mallory, who hadn't looked up from his desk all morning, blinked twice and stood. "Ma'am, are you lost?" he asked, not unkindly. She tilted her head slightly. "No, child, I'm exactly where I need to be." Every voice in the room stilled. The cold case whisper, she moved like a ghost through the buzzing tension of the precinct, slow but sure. Her cane found the edges of rugs and desks like it had memorized the layout years ago. The officers couldn't place her face, but they felt something stir. Familiar, reverent, like the sudden memory of an old song. Sergeant Mallory caught up beside her, unsure what to make of the moment. "Can I help you with something specific?" "I need to speak to the one who watches the cold," she said. He blinked. Cold cases, baby," she said with a knowing smirk. "Files the rest of y'all gave up on." The line between absurd and curious thinned in his mind. Most days, they barely got leads on cases from last year. Now this blind stranger was requesting the department's most hopeless folder. "You here to file a report?" "I'm here to end one," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades. Something in her voice wrapped around Mallory like smoke, pulling him into the unexplainable. Against every rule in the book, he led her to Lieutenant Harris, the man buried in cold files, sipping his fourth cup of black coffee. "She says she knows something," Mallory whispered. Harris sighed, about to wave her off, but then he heard the name that came out of her mouth next, David Carter, and froze in his chair, 30 years cold. And somehow this woman had come to thaw it out. A name buried in dust. Lieutenant Harris didn't even lift his eyes when she said the name, until she said it a second time, David Carter. This time, the name cracked like thunder inside his head. Harris looked up, puzzled and suddenly very alert. The cold case file lay open in front of him, as if summoned by fate. David Carter, found dead in his basement in the summer of 1995. Cause of death: suicide by hanging. Case closed. Too quickly, if you asked Harris. "You knew David Carter?" he asked. Mama Bell didn't smile, but her face softened like someone remembering a boy's laugh echoing down the street long gone. "He was just a boy when they said he took his life," she said, "but I knew that child. That wasn't in him. He feared basements more than anything, wouldn't even go down there for a jar of his mama's preserves. The room felt tighter." Mallory exchanged a glance with Harris. Most people didn't even remember the Carter case, let alone the detail about his fear of the dark. It was something only family, or someone close, would know. Harris spoke slowly. "And you're saying you don't think it was suicide?" Mama Bell tilted her head like she was listening to the past whispering in her ears. "I'm not saying it. He is. He came to me last night in the quiet when the rain first started, told me he's tired of waiting, tired of lying in silence while his truth goes unheard." Harris blinked. "You're saying the victim came to you. He's been waiting for justice," she said, "and today is the day he gets it." The truth in the shadows. There was a long, uneasy silence before Harris spoke again. "So if David didn't take his life, who did?" Mama Bell's hand moved gently to the pouch resting in her lap. Her fingers were slow and steady, almost ceremonial. She pulled out a small, time-worn Polaroid. One edge burned slightly, the ink faded. She held it out, palm open. "David and Jake took this picture 2 weeks before the killing." Harris leaned in, picking it up with care. Two boys grinned back at him from a porch swing, arms slung over each other's shoulders. David Carter on the left, and a boy with light brown curls and a crooked smile on the right. Scribbled on the back, "Jake Summer, 95. I remember this kid." Harris muttered, "Jake Mallon. They said he left town right after the funeral." "He didn't leave," Mama Bell said softly. "He just became someone else." Harris raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "He changed his name, lives under E.J. Harper now, works construction. Still lives 2 blocks from his mama's old house, like the ghost of a lie." The room went silent again, this time heavy, like the weight of buried truth was pressing in. Mama Bell leaned in. They argued over money. Jake owed him. David threatened to go to the police. Jake couldn't let that happen, so he used David's own belt against him, staged it like a hanging, but he left fingerprints on the beam. You never found them because you never looked twice. Mallory's breath caught. "How do you know all this?" "I told you," she whispered. "The dead don't always stay quiet. Some scream in silence for decades, until someone's willing to listen." Harris glanced down at the photo again, suddenly aware that this day, this hour, this moment, might be the key that unlocks a 30-year-old lie, and the blind woman before him. She hadn't come to ask questions. She came to give answers. The name behind the smile, Lieutenant Harris's fingers tightened around the edges of the photograph. "Jake Mallon," he repeated under his breath, as if tasting something bitter. The name had always floated on the outskirts of the Carter case, mentioned once or twice in the background, but never seriously pursued. Jake was supposedly David's best friend. Neighbors said he helped organize the memorial. A grieving teen, they'd assumed, but then he vanished. Mama Bell leaned back in her chair, resting both hands on her cane. Jake wasn't just grieving, he was hiding. Guilt eats loud when it's fresh, but it learns to whisper after a while. That's how he's lived all these years, under a new name, behind a new smile. Harris tapped a pen against the desk, thinking hard. "You said he goes by E.J. Harper now." She nodded. "That's right. Lives under that name, pays taxes, works with his hands, like he built a new life on top of David's grave." Mallory pulled out a laptop and started typing. The office hummed with sudden energy, like everyone sensed the shift. A cold case was thawing in real time. Mama Bell's voice cut through the quiet. "They used to be inseparable, you know, like blood brothers. But Jake had demons, gambling, owed the wrong people. David tried to help, but when he threatened to go to the police, Jake panicked." Harris sat still, the silence around them thick as syrup. "You're saying he killed him to protect himself?" "I'm saying," she whispered, "he took his best friend's life and left his mother to mourn alone for 30 years. That kind of darkness don't stay buried, it rots." A photo forgotten by time. Harris passed the faded Polaroid to Mallory. "Was this in the official case file?" he asked. Mallory frowned. "No, I've reviewed the Carter file front to back. This picture's not in it." Mama Bell nodded. "Because it was never given to the police. David's mama gave it to me before she passed, told me to keep it close, said it was the last day she saw her son smile, and the last time she ever trusted that boy Jake. The photo was more than an image. It was a bridge back to a forgotten truth." Two boys on a porch swing, laughter frozen in time. Jake had his arm around David's shoulder, but there was something strange about his expression. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. That picture, Mama Bell said softly, was taken by Mrs. Carter. She told me Jake was acting odd that day, quiet, jumpy. David had just found out Jake stole money from his college savings. Mallory looked up from the laptop, eyes wide. "Lieutenant, she's right. E.J. Harper is a registered contractor in the city. Same birth date as Jake Mallon. No criminal record, but, get this, he filed for a legal name change in 1997, 2 years after David's death." Harris's heartbeat kicked up a notch. Everything was unraveling. The lie was bleeding through the cracks. Mama Bell tapped her cane gently against the floor. "Now you see why I came. You weren't gonna find this in your files. The truth didn't live in your records. It lived in the spaces between the facts. It lived in the silences." And now, with a single photograph and the trembling voice of the past, the walls around the Carter case had begun to crumble. The truth was no longer buried. It was knocking, loud. The ghost who changed his name, the office buzzed now. Phones blinking, keys clacking, officers murmuring as if the very air had shifted. E.J. Harper, formerly Jake Mallon, had suddenly transformed from a forgotten name into the center of a decade's old storm. Mallory's voice cut through the tension. "I've confirmed it. Name change petition was filed in July 1997, 2 years after David Carter's death. Jake Mallon legally became Elijah J. Harper." Mama Bell nodded slowly, as if she'd already read the files long ago. Jake couldn't live with what he did, but he wasn't ready to face justice either, so he ran, not to another town, but into another name, thought if he changed the label, the past couldn't find him. Lieutenant Harris pulled up a current DMV photo. There he was, older, a bit heavier, but unmistakable. Same sharp jawline, same narrow scar under the chin, the same haunted eyes that never quite matched his grin. "Still lives near the neighborhood he grew up in," Harris muttered, almost in disbelief. "2 blocks from the Carter house. Because guilt doesn't always flee far," Mama Bell whispered. "Sometimes it stays close, lurks in the shadow of what it broke." The room went quiet again. Jake Mallon had become E.J. Harper, but the truth never changed. A web untangled in 1 hour for 30 years, the David Carter case had gathered dust in an old box on a forgotten shelf. Officers had reviewed it. Analysts had glanced at it. But no one ever saw it, until Mama Bell arrived. Now, in less than an hour, the pieces had aligned like stars pulled by unseen gravity. The photo, the name change, the hidden debt, the motive, the false suicide. And all of it uncovered not by lab reports or surveillance footage, but by the memory of a grieving mother, a woman of intuition, and a past that refused to stay silent. Lieutenant Harris felt the shift in his bones. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was justice clawing its way back to life. He stood up, closing the old Carter file slowly. "Let's reopen it," he said firmly. "Officially, I want E.J. Harper brought in for questioning within the hour. Officers nodded and scattered. Phones were dialed. A patrol car was dispatched. Mallory looked at Mama Bell, eyes wide with something between awe and disbelief. How did you really know all this?" She rose from her chair with the grace of someone half her age. "I listen," she said. "The living shout over each other, but the dead speak in whispers. You just have to know which silence to hear." And with that she turned, her cane tapping once again across the floor, as the entire station buzzed behind her. She hadn't needed a badge. She brought the truth, and that was louder than any siren. The arrest of a man who thought he buried the past, the knock on E.J. Harper's door came just after 7 p.m. Firm, final, and echoing like fate. He opened it casually, wiping sawdust from his hands. "Yeah?" he asked, blinking into the flashing lights of the 2 cruisers parked behind the officers. "Elijah J. Harper," one officer asked. "That's me. You're under arrest for the 1995 murder of David Carter." For a second, the world froze. E.J.'s expression shifted. First confusion, then shock, and then something deeper, recognition. The name had caught up to him. The lie he buried had grown legs and walked its way back to his doorstep. He didn't fight. Inside his garage, officers found the box that sealed his fate. Beneath layers of old blueprints and rusted tools was a smaller box, weathered and locked. Inside, photos, a journal from 1994-1995, and 1 page folded dozens of times. It was a confession, written just a year after David's death. In it, Jake Mallon had scribbled the words he never said aloud. "He wasn't supposed to die. I just wanted to scare him. He kept pushing me, threatening to expose me. I panicked. "I'm sorry, David. I wish I could take it back." That was all the case needed. 30 years of silence shattered in an instant. Justice, long thought buried with David, was now fully alive. The legend who left without a good. By the time the news of the arrest reached Southside Precinct, the rain had stopped and the air felt different, like the city had exhaled. Lieutenant Harris stood in his office, holding the worn Polaroid in one hand and the signed confession in the other. "She was right," he whispered. "She was more than right," Mallory added. "She did what we couldn't do in 30 years in under 60 minutes. But Mama Bell was gone, no calls, no name on the visitor log. No trace. She'd left as quietly as she arrived, her cane's soft tap the only echo she left behind. Some said they saw her turn the corner outside, others claimed she never walked out at all. Rumors flew. Some said she was a spirit. Others swore she was an angel in disguise. Harris didn't care what she was. She brought the truth. A week later, a letter arrived at the station. No return address. Inside was a simple message handwritten in flowing script. Justice don't need eyes, just ears that listen and hearts brave enough to act. MB, they framed it, right beside David Carter's reopened case file. Because sometimes the greatest detectives don't wear badges. Sometimes they carry canes and hear the whispers no one else dares to hear. Justice has no expiration date, David Carter's name, once just a dusty file number in a forgotten drawer, now rests on the lips of a city that finally remembers him. A 30-year lie collapsed under the weight of a single hour, and the footsteps of a woman who couldn't see the world, but saw through it more clearly than anyone else ever could. Mama Bell never returned for applause. No media, no headlines, no reward, because she didn't come for glory. She came because justice needed someone to listen when no one else would, and just like that, she was gone. But at Southside Precinct, when the nights stretch long and a case seems too cold to touch, some officers still say they hear the quiet tap of a cane near the evidence room, a reminder that truth never dies. It just waits, and sometimes when the world stops watching, it walks in, quiet, steady, blind, but unstoppable, just like she did.